The auditorium lights dimmed to a soft white glow as the First Lady of the United States took the stage. Jill Biden, dressed in cream and confidence, greeted the crowd with a warm smile that had been rehearsed across countless state visits and charity events. This was her latest stop on what the press dubbed the Kindness Tour, a nationwide initiative meant to heal divisions and promote unity. Behind her, a massive LED screen displayed empathy, dignity, decency. The audience was carefully curated: educators, community leaders, journalists from outlets already shaping the morning's headlines. And somewhere among them, sitting near the back with his signature squint and a legal pad half full of scribbles, was Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana. He wasn't invited to speak, he came to listen. And not kindly. As Jill launched into her speech, stories of school children, veterans, and small-town resilience, the applause came in polite, rhythmic bursts. But something was off. Her words hovered more than they landed. Her tone, though soft, carried a practiced detachment, like a speech written by 10 hands, none of them hers. Then it happened. A journalist asked from the audience. Dr. Biden, some critics say this kindness tour feels disconnected from the administration's policy decisions, particularly those affecting rural communities. How do you respond? She smiled again, tilted her head slightly, and answered with a line pulled straight from the campaign playbook. Kindness isn't a policy, it's who we are as a country. A few seats back, Kennedy let out the faintest exhale. He closed his notepad and leaned forward, just enough to catch the moderator's attention. Ma'am, he said slowly, drawl thickening like storm clouds, would now be a good time to ask why your tour skipped every zip code within 100 miles of a closed-down coal plant? Silence. Then murmurs. And just like that, the kindness tour had a reality check. Jill Biden didn't flinch at first. She held her smile like a statue, polished, immovable. But anyone who paid attention could see it, the subtle shift in her posture, the slight narrowing of her eyes. She hadn't expected to be challenged. Not here, not by him. The room's energy changed, cameras turned. Every political reporter in the building knew something rare was unfolding, an unscripted moment in a sea of talking points. Senator Kennedy rose from his seat. I just find it mighty curious, he said, voice calm but edged like a polished blade, that this kindness tour makes stops in wine country and press clubs, but skips the food banks and factory towns. Some gasped, others scribbled. Jill straightened, finally speaking again. Senator Kennedy, she began, voice carefully measured, this initiative is about hope, unity, and listening, not political ambushes. I'm not ambushing anyone, ma'am, Kennedy fired back, I'm just wondering how kind it is to smile through speeches while ignoring the real-world consequences of the policies your husband signs. That was the line. The shift. The applause had stopped entirely now. The crowd wasn't breathing, it was bracing. Jill stepped back from the podium slightly, as if reclaiming personal space. Her team behind her exchanged tight glances, fingers hovering near earpieces. They didn't prepare for this. They thought it was going to be a feel-good highlight reel. Senator, she replied, more clipped this time, I would appreciate it if we could keep this focused on kindness rather than confrontation. Kennedy gave a dry, almost amused nod. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do, is confront what's broken. The silence returned, but this time, it was louder than ever. Outside the event hall, the headlines were already writing themselves. Kennedy clashes with First Lady at kindness event. Senator turns empathy tour into interrogation. But inside, the moment hadn't passed, it had just begun to burn. The moderator, clearly unsettled, tried to regain control. Let's remember, this forum was intended for community healing. But Jill held up a hand. Her voice, now tighter, carried the weight of someone used to command, but rarely challenged. Senator, I've spent months listening to families, veterans, teachers. I've seen pain and resilience. You don't get to reduce that to sound bites and suspicion. Kennedy didn't blink. And I've spent years visiting the same communities that haven't seen a single policy improve their lives. Not one. So forgive me if I don't clap for photo ops and press kits." Gasps rippled across the room. A few attendees began murmuring, "Let her speak." Others looked at Kennedy with a mix of curiosity and awe. He wasn't yelling, he wasn't grandstanding. He was calm, and that made it sting worse. Jill stepped forward. "With all due respect, Senator, your version of truth seems to come with an insult attached to every sentence." He smirked faintly. "I find people listen better when they're a little uncomfortable." Boom, that landed. A woman in the second row whispered to her colleague, "He's not wrong." A producer in the back texted one word to her team. "Firestorm." The First Lady inhaled deeply, recentering. This was no longer a speech, it was a battle for moral authority. And the audience? They weren't clapping anymore. They were choosing sides. Kennedy sat down slowly, deliberately. His expression said he was far from finished. And Jill? For the first time during the entire tour. She looked like she had something to prove. Within the hour, clips of the confrontation flooded social media. The exchange wasn't just replayed, it was dissected, loop by loop. Frame by frame, Kennedy erupts at kindness tour. Jill Biden faces unexpected backlash. Kindness versus candor, who won? Networks scrambled. Pundits split into two camps, those who praised Kennedy for speaking truth to spin, and those who accused him of bullying the First Lady. But Kennedy didn't chase the noise. He stayed quiet, at least for the next 12 hours. Behind the scenes, however, both teams were regrouping. In the East Wing, Jill Biden's advisors huddled in a private meeting room, reviewing every word, every gesture. One aide was visibly shaking. "We should have vetted the crowd better." "He wasn't in the crowd," another snapped. "He was the crowd." Jill, seated calmly at the head of the table, broke the silence. "If he wants facts, let's give him numbers. Data, testimonials." She wasn't backing down, she was preparing for round two. Meanwhile, in a tucked-away Senate office, Kennedy was having a very different kind of meeting, no handlers, no fluff. Just a few advisors and a chalkboard. She called it a kindness tour, Kennedy muttered, writing the words in big block letters. "Let's see what it's been kind to." A staffer chimed in. "We pulled every federal spending record from the last 18 months. There's a pattern." "Good," Kennedy said. "Let's hold it up to the light." The contrast was striking. One side scripting virtue, the other plotting exposure. That night, Jill Biden appeared on a late-night interview, smiling wide but guarded. "I believe in unity," she said softly. "But unity can't come from division." Back in Louisiana, Kennedy watched the segment with arms crossed. When asked by a reporter for comment, he simply said, "Unity is a great slogan. But it doesn't fill gas tanks or fix grocery bills." By morning, the rematch wasn't just expected. It was inevitable. 3 days later, the kindness tour rolled into Baton Rouge, a bold move, Kennedy's home turf. The press called it a coincidence. Kennedy didn't buy it for a second. This time, he didn't wait in the back. He sat front row, center seat, eyes fixed on the stage like a hawk sizing up a sermon. The crowd was different now, mixed with locals, skeptics, and a few who only showed up because they'd seen the clip go viral. Jill Biden stepped up to the podium, flanked by security and a noticeably tenser entourage. She opened with a smile, but this time, it trembled. Louisiana has always been a place of strength, a place of community. Kennedy leaned forward slightly, as if daring her to look his way. She didn't. And kindness isn't just in our words, it's in our willingness to show up, even when the room is divided. A few claps. A few phones already recording. Then she pivoted. It's easy to criticize. It's harder to build. It's harder to lead. It's harder to listen. Kennedy's eyebrow lifted. A challenge. Issued. When the Q&A portion opened, it was no surprise whose hand went up first. The room held its breath. The moderator, almost hesitating, pointed. Senator Kennedy. He stood, no microphone needed. You talk about leadership, ma'am. But if leading means telling people everything's fine while ignoring the price of milk, I'm not sure what that leadership builds. Some gasped. Others nodded. Jill responded quickly, this time more composed. I never said everything was fine. But shouting problems without offering solutions isn't leadership, it's theater. Kennedy didn't flinch. Well, ma'am, maybe the folks out here would settle for a little theater if it meant someone actually noticed them. Boom. No moderator could reel it back now. The audience was split, but no one looked away. It wasn't a town hall anymore, it was a reckoning. Two figures on stage, armed not with fists, but with truths, and very different definitions of kindness. And the country? It was watching. By the next morning, every major outlet had picked up the second exchange. Kennedy doubles down in Baton Rouge. First Lady faces Louisiana showdown. Is the kindness tour losing its shine? Cable news went wall to wall. On progressive channels, Jill was framed as Grace under fire. On conservative platforms, Kennedy was painted as the truth-teller America needed. But it was the internet where the battle truly ignited. On TikTok, a clip of Kennedy's milk line racked up 2 million views in 6 hours. On X, hashtags like hashtag Kennedy vs. Kindness and hashtag Truth Over Tact began trending. Reddit threads, podcasts, political YouTubers, everyone had an opinion. In this arena, the question wasn't just who was right, it was who was real. Meanwhile, both camps went on offense. The White House released a video montage of Jill hugging children, visiting veterans, hosting listening circles. The caption read, "Kindness in action. Not just words." Kennedy's team responded with a press conference. Charts, budget breakdowns. A list of towns in Louisiana that hadn't received a dime in community aid since the administration took office. We don't need sympathy, we need support, he said, holding up a photo of a closed rural school. If kindness skips this town, it ain't kindness. Jill Biden didn't respond directly, she didn't have to. That night, she appeared on 60 Minutes with a tone of quiet defiance. You can be strong and still believe in kindness. That's not weakness. That's courage. It was polished. Poised, presidential even. But Kennedy? He wasn't done. He appeared on a local radio show the next morning. If smiling through broken promises is courage, then I'd rather be accused of being rude. And with that, the lines were drawn not just between two people, but between two Americas. The soft gloves were off. Now it was about grit. 2 weeks had passed since Baton Rouge, but the feud hadn't cooled, it had metastasized. Jill Biden's memoir sales had mysteriously spiked. Kennedy's YouTube appearances were hitting record numbers. Supporters from both sides had turned their leaders into avatars for deeper cultural wars. But that wasn't the real escalation. The real escalation came when Jill's team made a calculated move. They released a campaign-style ad targeting rhetoric politics, without naming names. But one clip stood out. A slow zoom on Kennedy's face during an old Senate hearing, he looked frustrated, maybe even exhausted. The voiceover? Jill's. Real leadership listens. It doesn't lash out, subtle. But strategic. Kennedy? He didn't do subtle. At a town hall in Monroe, he walked on stage with a manila folder in one hand. They say I don't listen. Maybe they should have listened to this. He held up a printed report, a 2014 government audit showing unused federal community development funds. Funds that were supposed to support initiatives like the Kindness Tour. You want to talk about courage? Let's talk about what it takes to pretend nothing's broken when it's all falling apart. He paused, then added the blow. And let's stop pretending kindness is a tour. It should be a job description. The room erupted. Reporters called it the moment Kennedy went nuclear. AOC tweeted, "Someone's got a folder full of fury and no filter." Jill's response? Carefully worded, of course, during a university speech the next day. It's easy to hold up papers. It's harder to hold people's hands when they're suffering. That line went viral. But Kennedy's camp clapped back with a short clip from Louisiana, an elderly woman saying, "I don't need my hand held. I need my street lights fixed." Boom. The battle wasn't about kindness anymore. It was about who got to define it, and whether anyone still believed it could fix anything. By now, it wasn't just a feud. It was the story. Debate moderators were asking presidential candidates where they stood, team kindness or team candor. Talk shows turned it into a game. Late-night comedians made skits. College students wrote essays. Middle schoolers reenacted the town hall. What began as a clash of words had become a clash of philosophies. Jill Biden, now back in D.C., held a roundtable with educators and community leaders. Cameras rolled as she softly said, "We cannot let cynicism replace compassion. That's not the country I believe in." She meant every word. But the country? It was listening to Kennedy too. That same day, Kennedy stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for a new health clinic, one funded not by a federal grant, but by a coalition of small-town donors and business owners. He didn't smile for the camera. He looked into it. You don't get to call folks bitter when you've never had to choose between medicine and food. That ain't bitterness. That's being awake. He paused. And if kindness means asking folks to smile while they suffer, then maybe it's time we redefine that word. The line echoed beyond the clinic parking lot. It was clipped, subtitled, remixed. Even late-night hosts fell silent. Suddenly, a staffer from Jill's office leaked a memo to the press, an internal conversation about whether to end the kindness tour altogether. It wasn't confirmed, but the rumor spread. Did Kennedy shut down the tour with one line? 1 week later, Jill Biden canceled 2 appearances, citing a personal scheduling conflict. Kennedy didn't celebrate. He just released a statement. America doesn't need a tour. It needs traction. And yet, the final word hadn't been said. Not yet. Because behind closed doors, the First Lady was preparing one last address, not to Kennedy, not to the press, but to the American people. One more chance to reclaim the meaning of her message. And Kennedy? He'd be watching. The venue was Georgetown University. The event? A nationally televised conversation on the future of civic leadership. The organizers had planned for months. But no one expected this. Jill Biden and Senator John Kennedy, confirmed to speak. Separately, yes. But sequentially. The tension? Palpable. Security was doubled. Press passes were limited. Every cable network was live streaming. First came the First Lady. She stepped onto the stage in a white suit, no teleprompter, no entourage. Some think kindness is soft. That it means letting go of truth to make room for feelings. I disagree. I think it takes more strength to be gentle, especially when you're angry. There was no applause line. Just silence. Respectful. Curious. We don't have to agree. But we have to stop turning disagreement into destruction. She ended with a quote from Maya Angelou. People will forget what you said, forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. She exited the stage without turning back. Then came Kennedy. No notes. No jacket. Just rolled up sleeves and a steel stare. He waited until the microphone stopped humming. "Ma'am," he began, not as an insult, not as a jab. "You've got heart. I ain't never questioned that. But folks back home? They don't get to live on heart alone. He walked forward. They don't want to feel seen. They want to be helped. And they're tired of being a photo op. The crowd didn't cheer. They leaned in. This ain't about who's more polite. It's about who's more present. It's about who sticks around after the cameras leave. He paused. And I'll tell you what real kindness is. It's showing up with answers. Not slogans. He tipped his head. Then walked off stage. No handshakes. No side glances. But respect, unmistakable. The camera caught Jill Biden backstage, nodding, half in disagreement, half in admiration. Because maybe, just maybe, this wasn't about winning anymore. It was about making America listen again. A week passed. The Georgetown exchange had done something no press release, viral clip, or Senate hearing ever could. It reminded people that disagreement didn't have to mean destruction. Kennedy was back in Louisiana. Jill was in Philadelphia. And yet, their words were still bouncing across dinner tables, podcasts, and classrooms. Cable news had moved on, but the country hadn't. Letters flooded both their offices. Some were angry. Some were grateful. But all of them had one thing in common: they had watched. And they had felt something. One came from a retired schoolteacher in Nebraska. You two disagree on just about everything, but for the first time, I listened to both of you without wanting to shut the TV off. Another, from a small business owner in Kentucky. You made me mad. Then you made me think. That's leadership. Jill released a final kindness tour video. Not flashy, just her sitting at a kitchen table, thanking Americans for listening, even if they didn't agree. I believe kindness is strength. But now I see that strength comes in many forms. Kennedy didn't respond publicly. He didn't need to. A photo surfaced online, no caption, no press release. Just him, seated at a diner with two veterans, pouring them coffee. The top comment? Maybe this is what kindness looks like. In the end, there was no winner. No mic drop. No gotcha moment. Just a conversation. One that, against all odds, people were still having. And maybe, just maybe, that was the whole point. In a time when shouting matches often replace meaningful dialogue, what happened between Senator Kennedy and First Lady Jill Biden wasn't just a political clash, it was a mirror. A mirror held up to a nation torn between empathy and blunt truth, between feel-good slogans and real-world grit. They didn't agree, they didn't need to. But for one rare moment, America paused, and listened. Maybe that's how change begins. Not with a roar. But with two very different voices refusing to be silenced.